Play Nirvana.
The Cobain 50.
Nirvana.
Kurt Cobain's top 50 albums.
Nirvana.
From listener-powered KEXP.
This is the Cobain 50 from listener-powered KEXP. I'm Martin Douglas.
And I'm Dusty Henry. This week, Roddy Nikpour dives into the album Entertainment by Gang of Four, which dropped in 1979. We were just talking about this earlier before we got on the mic. I think this is just one of the coolest sounding bands and records. It's just a cool sounding record.
Yeah, it's obviously got a very long shadow with all of the bands that sort of took this style and run with it. This is a fucking great record. And like, sometimes it doesn't need to be deeper than that.
Exactly. Well, on that note, let's get into it. Here's Roddy Nikpour diving into Entertainment by Gang of Four.
Guitar, bass, drums, vocals. You know, as Dusty said in our recent episode about Aerosmith, this is just about the most formulaic makeup of a rock and roll band. I mean, it's so predictable that the video game series Rock Band boils down dozens of pop songs to these four positions: guitar, bass, drums, vocals. And on the whole, this formula is what works for Gang of Four, notwithstanding the occasional melodica. So yes, this guitar, bass, drums formula may be predictable, but how you use those instruments, that is the quest that Gang of Four set out on. And they totally innovated new sounds, all from 6 slinky strings, 4 fat strings, 2 sticks, and a couple of dudes ready to yell about problems with modern society.
How can I sit and eat my tea with all that blood flowing from the television? At 5:45, I watch the news. Eating all my food as I sit watching the red spot in the egg, which looks like all the blood you don't see on the television.
It's the sort of matter-of-fact delivery mixed with outraged instrumentals that you hear in the likes of Car Seat Headrest.
The other night I cried while thinking of having sex with you, not out of desire or shame, but some subconscious impulse to feel pain.
LCD Sound System.
Well, everybody's lined up in my house, my house. And Sarah's girlfriend is working the door.
Ought.
I'm no longer afraid to die. 'Cause that is all that I have left.
Idols.
Hold the phone, hit the hip, cheek to cheek. Push me away like I'm Lucifer, so to speak. My focus is on the cold, cold butter running down your neck and the sweat.
And, of course, Nirvana. You know, Kurt once said that Nirvana started out as a ripoff of Gang of Four, which is a pretty good explanation for why they're on the list. Gang of Four came together in the mid-70s in Leeds, about 200 miles north of London. The band's founding members were bassist Dave Wolfson, drummer Hugo Burnham, vocalist John King, and guitarist Andy Gill. The band name, Gang of Four, is a riff on a group from the Chinese government that was fighting to guard the country's communist values from the threat of capitalism. The band Gang of Four has no ties to the Chinese Cultural Revolution, of course, and yet their first album, Entertainment, with an exclamation point, is full of disdain for religion and capitalist values. You know, topics that are pretty easy to get angry about.
No big men. The books at home. The strong men who have made the world is killing on. The books at home. The books at home. It's not made for great men. It's not made for great men.
Another prevalent theme throughout their music, the kind of bleak feeling that comes with coming of age. particularly as it relates to sex and romance. Like the track Anthrax, which features King and Gill going back and forth, kind of about how pop culture has oversimplified the idea of falling in love, and how it's kind of paraded as an inescapable poison in society. Music critic Stuart Mason has said that Anthrax is an anti-love song. The band compares themselves to a beetle on its back, not wanting to be exposed to anthrax. The idea being that once you have had a taste of being in love, it's in you forever.
And I feel like a beetle on its back.
Go along with what
And there's
belief
no
that love
way
is deep in
for
everyone's
me to get
personality.
up.
I
Love
don't
will
think
kick you
we're
like
saying
a
there's
case of
anything wrong with love.
anthrax.
We just don't think that what goes on
And
with
that's
certain
something
people
I
should be
don't
shrouded
wanna
in
catch.
mystery.
This disillusionment continues in other tracks, like Natural's Not In It. This track also deals with the commercialization of romance. In other words, you're bored? Have sex. Because after all, the body is good business. It can be bought and sold. And, well, like all goods and services, the flow of cash is what keeps society afloat.
The problem of a leisure, what to do for pleasure. Ideal love, a new purchase, a market of the senses. Dream of the perfect life, economic circumstances. The body is good business, sell out, maintain the interest.
These themes culminate in the song that's arguably Gang of Four's most recognizable song, Damaged Goods. This song, and really all of the songs on Entertainment, are accompanied by some of the most danceable guitar riffs you've ever heard. And yet those lyrics, they sing, "Sometimes I'm thinking that I love you, but I know it's only lust. The sins of the flesh are simply sins of lust." It's the gold standard for coming-of-age angst. The kind of music you'd want to hear when you sneak out of your parents' room and go find a house show somewhere. Total defiance of worldviews that are prescribed by parents, teachers, governments. Instead, it's a critique of how we've come to learn about one of the most basic human instincts. And so much regret of that religious perspective that portrays experienced lovers as damaged goods.
Your kiss so sweet, your sweat so sour. Sometimes I'm thinking that I love you, but I know it's only lust. The sins of the flesh are simply sins of lust.
Kurt Cobain sings about romance this way throughout Nirvana's music. And as we've said in our episode about the Knack, Kurt has said that he wasn't interested in writing about relationships, more so the problems that people have when they're in relationships.
Broken heart and broken bones, finger plastic cast and pause pills. One more quirky cliche phrase. You're the one I wanna refill.
Entertainment has 12 fiery songs on it that set the band up for success over the next 40 years. They've since released 10 studio albums as well as several live albums and compilations. One of the most outstanding of these is the Peel session that they recorded with the famed BBC host John Peel.
I knew I'd get what I asked for. I found that everywhere what I looked for. I knew I'd get what I asked for.
And over the years, a few band members have left and reunited. There was even a stretch in the 2000s when all 4 original band members were playing and touring together. And one of their most critically acclaimed albums since their debut came out in 2011, Content.
You never pay for the fun. Someone should raise the alarm. I think you're losing your charm. You cannot do all the harm.
From this point, there was a discrepancy between vocalist John King and guitarist Andy Gill. Against King's wishes, the band didn't exactly break up. Gill carried the torch and kept performing with a different lineup. New vocal stylings, but Gill's signature guitar style.
The problem of leisure. What to do for pleasure.
This tension between King and Gill was never really resolved before eventually in 2020, Andy Gill passed away at just 64 years old. Since it was still early in the COVID pandemic, it was unclear whether it was organ failure or coronavirus. In 2021, Gang of Four put out a tribute album called The Problem of Leisure, which is a lifted lyric from the song Natural's Not In It. According to Andy Gill's website, this was supposed to be a 40-year anniversary album, but it never came to pass before Gill died. As part of the tribute to the band's mark on post-punk, it contains 20 songs from the band's discography, featuring various artists who have been explicitly inspired by Andy Gill's guitar playing. It includes Idols on the track Damaged Goods,
Your kiss so sweet, your sweat so sour. Sometimes I'm thinking that I love you, but I know it's only lust.
Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers on Not Great Men, and a crazy pairing that just kind of makes sense for the song Natural's Not In It, Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine on guitar, and on vocals, Serge Tankian of System of a Down.
The problem of leisure, what to do for pleasure. Ideal of a new purchase, a market of the senses, dream of the perfect life, economic circumstances, the body is good business, sell out, maintain the interest.
Since they put out this tribute album, Gang of Four has gone on tour and played multiple shows, and this lineup now consists of 2 founding members, drummer Hugo Burnham and vocalist John King again, alongside David Pajo on guitar, who's formerly from Slint and other bands, and Gail Greenwood on bass, formerly of L7. For almost 50 years, I'd say Gang of Four has been kind of the anti-hero of pop music. They took the tools of the good guys and used them against society in order to help society. Their pounding sound stirred up the formula that pop music was using, and they adopted the common themes of pop music like love, only to shame them outright. And that is what I would call entertainment.
That was Roddy Nikpour digging into entertainment by Gang of Four. So a few years ago, I actually had an encounter with John King and Hugo Burnham from Gang of Four.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I was presenting a paper at the Pop Conference here in Seattle back when I was at Mopop. And I was on this panel. It was about rock star resurrections. And I was looking at the panel of who was all going to be presenting, and I saw these names, John King and Hugo Burnham. I'm like, those names sound really familiar. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh shit, that's the dudes from Gang of Four. And it was this sort of like round robin thing where each person presents their paper, and I had to go on after them, which is
yikes.
You had to follow Gang of Four. And I met them like before, and they were like the coolest guys, like so like they played off each other so well. Like it was almost like a ping pong match of like how they talk, almost finish each other's sentences, and they're like, "Come to our DJ night," like having flyers. I'm like, "You're Gang of Four. Like, you don't need to be doing this." And they presented their paper, and it was just this amazing. They were like singing songs, jumping up and down, like giving this whole thing. Anyways, it ended up going pretty well, but I like to tell people that Gang of Four opened for me. I'm really glad to kind of, give them that opportunity to get some shine.
That's a great anecdote. Honestly, imagine members of Gang of Four like handing out flyers. Oh, come to my DJ night. Like what?
Yeah. They're going to sell CDs outside their car, or the trunk of their car after.
I feel like every now and again we talk about albums that have felt like they've always been around. I don't remember the first time I heard this album. It's got to be like somebody was playing it at a friend's house or something. But even that is a wild guess because I have no clue. It just feels like these songs have always been around for me.
I definitely resonate with that because I'm trying to recall like sitting down, listening to this record. It's just like osmosis. Like It's just always been there. It's just always been there. And it feels like it's cool going back to something like this because you start to see, you remember hearing it for one, and then you see like the roots this put into so much of the music we listen to now.
Yeah.
Especially like so many elements, but the guitar sound of this record, what you hear pretentious music journalists like ourselves call angular guitars, which I don't know what that means, but you feel it, you know? This feels very angular.
I was going to say I had no clue what angular even meant, but I am looking at a note from Roddy Nikpour, which says that angular is kind of like the high-end tone and choppy rhythms of the guitar.
Followed by a bunch of shrugging emojis, I should note.
But it's funny because, like, you mentioned that the sound you hear from Entertainment is that angular guitar sound, where for me, like, I hear the drums and the bass, like the rhythms are so embedded into music now. Like, I can't even say, you know, post-punk or whatever, you know. First of all, post-punk doesn't mean anything in 2024.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was pretty well defined in 1979, but like, this is the sound of post-punk, that bass and drums that are on this record, these rhythms, the kind of herky-jerky, but you can still dance to it type rhythms. Like, that is something that, has been around for, you know, 35 years now. 45 years, Jesus.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, like, that you can dance to, like, description, because I feel like that is maybe something that's missing as time's gone on. Like I said, it is so, like, fun and, like, jubilant and, like, while still being weird and off-putting at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. This music obviously has a message, but first and foremost, I think of it as party music.
Yeah.
And in a much different way from, like, the original sort of group of rock and roll bands, but it's still party music.
Absolutely. And, like, again, like, you see who it influenced. I think of bands like Block Party when they first came out. Black Midi is a more recent one. I guess R.I.P. Black Midi. They just announced they're breaking up.
Yeah.
Battles or Ott, maybe even Sonic Youth. You're the expert here, but I kind of see some of that like coming through their music as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely early Sonic Youth, where when they were more rhythm focused, I definitely hear Gang of Four in their sound for sure. We will be covering Sonic Youth in a couple episodes, maybe 2 or 3 episodes from now. So stay tuned for that. And also, like, not just bands like Block Party, Black Midi, Battles, you know, there's so many bands underneath the surface. Shopping is one that comes to mind for me. And just throughout the years since 1979, so many bands I've listened to have had that sort of rhythmic focus.
Yeah. Precursor to math rock in some ways.
Yeah,
Maybe not
absolutely.
as, like, technical about it. But you mentioned, you know, some deeper themes below the surface. I mean, as Roddy talks about in the piece, there's huge anti-capitalist themes on the album, which kind of reminded me of a certain band that had an album cover. I think it had a baby and a dollar bill on it or something. I feel like you can kind of see maybe that's where, when, you know, I was looking for how this might have impacted Kurt, like, beyond his guitar playing, which I think you can hear an influence as well, like, themes like that seem to really stick with him.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I think of the themes on this album, it makes me think of the time that it came out in and how Marxism wasn't quite as prevalent as it is now. I mean, obviously, in punk rock circles, Marxism was a huge thing that people were talking about. Yeah. But even punk rock circles weren't as big as they are now. Yeah. And I feel as though the sort of anti-capitalist screeds that permeate throughout this album are, you know, not to say commonplace as in like, oh, it's, you know, regular, but it's a big thing that we talk about as people as Americans, as young people in the shadow of late stage capitalism, where, you know, you got to give your right arm to be able to buy a house.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and you think of the time too, like coming out of like the Cold War and things. Like it just was a pretty radical message to put at the forefront and to make it danceable. Like,
Yeah.
because I think when you look at artists, like especially in punk music, where like it's kind of dreary, like, and I mean for a good reason,
Yeah.
you know, but they're able to take a powerful message and fuse it with music that sounded fun, that you wanted to listen to, and maybe invited you to dig deeper a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, still the most effective Trojan horse in music is making something catchy that you can dance to.
Yeah, exactly. And I think beyond all that, again, like we said at the beginning, it's hard to articulate, but this band just feels cool.
Yeah. You know, there's so much going on the album, but I think the main point that I come back to when listening to it is that, man, this just sounds cool. This is what I like to listen to.
Yeah. It's got that Andy Warhol cool, sleek kind of feel to it.
A sort of cool that never goes out of style, for sure.
This piece was produced and mixed by Roddy Nikpour. Our podcast manager is Isabel Khalili. Larry Mizell Jr. is our director of editorial.
And if you would like to return the gift that we're giving you on this podcast series, I would humbly suggest donating to KEXP. Next week is our fall drive. We do this drive twice a year. This is the time that we look to people for donations. You can leave that donation at kexp.org/Cobain. It's a great way to not only support us, but be a part of the KEXP community. And it's getting bigger and bigger every day, folks.
It is.
And yeah, we're going to get out of here. I'm Martin Douglas.
And I'm Dusty Henry. We'll see you next week on the Cobain 50 from listener-powered KEXP, where the music matters.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. It's the first time I'm hearing this. Not a canned reaction.
Not a canned reaction, folks.